All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedules to join us today for what we feel is a very important webinar today on navigating civil unrest. My name is Linnell Dalcor. I am the Director of Portfolio Security for Brookfield Properties operated by CBRE. Joining me today are fellow members of our AOBA Emergency Preparedness Committee, which we'll get into introductions to everyone shortly here. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that this webinar is brought to you today by AOBA and in conjunction with the AOBA Emergency Preparedness Committee. And Cynthia and Brandy are our liaisons for AOBA, and they are actually working with us today. So you won't hear them, but you will certainly see them as they will be changing slides and navigating us through today's webinar. We can go to the next slide, Cynthia. Couple of announcements before we get started. One of the announcements we want to discuss with you guys today is the 2024 KEEP Awards. And for those that are not familiar with what KEEP stands for, it's the Knowledge and Excellence in Emergency Preparedness. Applications are due December the 15th, 2024. Please feel free to mark your calendars. A hybrid award info session will be held on July 23rd. I'm going to now turn the room over to Dorothy Hamilton, who's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about the KEEP Award and the award session and all information regarding KEEP. So Dorothy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Linnell. So I work on emergency preparedness committee with Linnell. I co-chair it with Donna Norway from the tour companies, and I've also been involved in the KEEP Awards committee now for maybe 4 years. And the genesis of that is really that we looked at it at AOBA and emergency preparedness and realized that it's not really the biggest thing and the highest thing in everyone's priority list. I'm a property manager, and as property managers, we all have other priorities, our clients, our financials, our buildings, our tenants, and we don't really focus on emergency preparedness. But the way our world is these days, it's really important to think about how you're going to be prepared for an emergency, whether it's a bomb threat, whether it's a fire at your building, whether it's something really important and it's going to be big. It's big right now, and it's going to be bigger as going forward is civil unrest, and that's why we're having this today. So in order to get people to focus, we decided to set up an award called the KEEP Award, Knowledge and Excellence in Emergency Preparedness. We did that a few years ago, and in the beginning, we got some great responses, maybe 11, 12 applications. But like everyone during COVID, our priorities just changed a little bit, and we were more focused on other things. And we really are trying to get folks to focus once again on emergency preparedness. So if you could just all remind your folks that emergency preparedness is a really important thing. I will always remember working with Joe Donovan and with Beacon and working with people like FEMA and the FBI, all these kind of folks, MPD. And one of the things that they drilled into us was the more you practice, the more likely you are to survive an event. And I don't know about you, but I want to personally be prepared, not just the team that I work with, but I want to personally be prepared to lead that team and for my personal safety. So it's something that we should all focus on, not only for our building teams, for our clients, because some of you are third-party vendors. So let's make sure that everyone we're working on actually focuses on this. And the KEEP Awards is a great way to focus your people. Some people are results driven. I'm mega competitive. So I want to be a winner and I want to be the best. Let's make sure you instill that in your folks, that to be the best in emergency preparedness is really, really important, because you could survive a major event. And we want to focus this year, as Linnell is doing, on the civil unrest, and that's why we're having this webinar. So let's make sure, if you're a property manager, that you make sure your teams are focused on making that submission. And also, if you're a third-party vendor, work with your property management companies and make sure that they're focused on it. Get them focused, because they'll thank you for it. So The process for that is you make an application, you can do it online, you can see on the slide here, you can download the application online. Applications are due December 15th. If you would like any help or guidance, please reach out to me, reach out to Lynile, reach out to Kathy Guy, any of your security providers. We can all help you, sit down with you, do a call with you while you're filling that out, give you some guidance on it to make sure that you do the best and that you're a winner at the awards at AOBA in February 2025. Applications will be judged in January 2025, but let's make sure you're focused. We tried to take it out of budget season before it was in budget season in September. So we've tried to move it until December when everyone's budgets are mostly over with. So anyway, mark your calendars for that. And we're going to have some webinars coming up, and we'll be sending information out in them where you can go onto the webinars, ask questions, learn about it. So that's kind of it. I'm going to hand back to Lynile.
Hi, Dorothy. Thank you so much. This year I'm starting mine. I'm very proud to say I'm starting my 32nd year in commercial real estate security and life safety. I could not endorse anything bigger than the KEEP Awards for you guys. I've been around a long time, and there was never really any recognition for emergency preparedness and things of that nature. Here in the area that we all live and work in, we all know extremely how important it is to be prepared, not to stop events. We probably can't stop events, but as Dorothy said, to survive those events. I highly recommend that you jump on the webinars that are going to be available. You will find during your process of completing a KEEP Award nomination, you're going to discover some things about you. You're going to discover some things about your team, but most important, you're going to discover some things about your properties. Whether they're good or bad, you're going to learn more about your emergency preparedness. And this just gives you an opportunity to really take a deep look into what you're providing. And again, I cannot stress enough how important this KEEP Award is, and the name recognition. And I'm with Dorothy. I like to win. I'm a very competitive person as well. But I also like the fact that property managers actually get to learn, and they get to learn a lot about themselves and their property. So with that, we can go ahead, Cynthia, to the next slide and jump into our session today. So I am very, very honored to be joined by this elite group of speakers today. I'm very, very excited. We all are members of the AOBA Emergency Preparedness Committee. When we decided that we wanted to do a webinar for civil unrest, we reached out to this group, and without hesitation, every person here agreed to jump in. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll jump right into our webinar for the day. So first, we have Mr. Dave Taylor. Dave is the Vice President of Business Development for Fireline Corporation. Quite naturally, I'm Lynile Dalcor. I'm Director of Portfolio Security for Brookfield, operated by CBRE. My colleague, Sierra Clark, she's an Associate Real Estate Manager at Brookfield, operated by CBRE. And then we're joined by Will Gilmer. Will is a Senior Divisional Director for Admiral Security Services. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we're joined by Katrina Kennedy, who is a Business Development Manager at Garda World Security Services. Before we get started, I just want to thank the four of you, and I really appreciate all your effort and your time in the meetings and all the content that you put together to present to the members of AOBA today. So with that, Cynthia, if we can go to our next slide. First person up will be Dave Taylor. And Dave, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the things that I'm going to want to talk about today is we have seen with civil unrest, arson being used as a very, very bad tool to damage property and endanger people. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we might be able to protect our fire alarm and sprinkler systems if protesters are sophisticated and bold enough to use arson as a tactic. They also could be very well willing to try to damage or make inoperable fire alarm or sprinkler systems. So we're going to talk about some things that you can do to maybe harden your systems a little bit and make sure if you do have an arson event, your system will be able to notify people, and with regard to your sprinkler and suppression systems, put the fire out or control the fire until the fire department can get there. Next slide, please. It's not often thought about, but there are vulnerabilities with fire protection systems. We have seen the upcoming election and the protest around the world. We can expect that there's going to be civil unrest. We should be prepared for it. You know, retail establishment, government facilities, office buildings, they're often prime targets because they're in the center city. Arson really tests the capabilities of your fire protection systems because unlike a fire that starts organically or naturally, arson often involves accelerants, which can overwhelm systems that are designed to put out a normal fire condition. We don't talk about security and physical protection of sprinkler and fire alarm systems. It's often overlooked. We discuss this with our customers quite often, that you should be aware of this. We have seen portable fire extinguishers used as weapons. A 10-pound ABC fire extinguisher in the wrong hands, hitting someone in the head can certainly kill them. They're very heavy, they're metal, they are dangerous in the wrong hands. And whatever security plans you have with your buildings, they really should include fire protection systems. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you need to think about. Next slide, please. We've got consequences, obviously, of vandalization of fire protection systems. Devices are expensive to repair, like everything else in the construction industry these days. Inoperable devices present a variety of life safety hazards. Fire detection can be delayed or prevented, which is incredibly important to have an early response. Building occupants, they may not get enough time to get out of the building. Notification to the fire department might delay or fail. And obviously, inoperable sprinklers are not going to be able to control a fire. Very, very important. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do in between when your professional fire protection contractor performs their quarterly, semi-annual, and annual inspections. NFPA standards require certain weekly and monthly visual inspections that are typically done by building engineering staff. They are often overlooked, very often overlooked, and we like to review them with our customers to make sure that they are doing them, because it really isn't cost effective to have your fire protection professional do these things. It's an excellent practice to do these during normal times. During civil unrest, vital. Intentional impairments, they can be used to sabotage your system operations. And the important thing to note is they are not technically challenging, but easily detected. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of knowledge to intentionally sabotage a system. What you're going to be able to do with regular visual inspections is help yourself familiarize what is normal, what is not normal. You will notice impairments much more quickly when you're familiar with your system. Some of the weekly visual inspections include verification of normal fire alarm conditions, visual inspection of system gauges to make sure your water supply is where it needs to be. And as I said before, in preparation for civil unrest, visual inspections are not just a good practice, they're mandatory. Next slide, please. What are some specifics? One of the things that we notice in Washington, D.C. is fire control rooms are at street level by code. Hardening the doors and locks, especially street level access, locking the fire alarm control panel. I've seen some doors that are simply beautifully architecturally pleasing glass doors that one sledgehammer would get people in the fire alarm rooms. You should make sure all of your access panels are locked and secured. I know people have bolt cutters, but locks do provide a bit of a hurdle for them to get into them. You want to secure your telephone lines the same way to protect your digital communicators. You want to secure your power supplies. Lock your breakers open so that the power cannot be easily turned off. Very important. Understand what an off-normal fire alarm system signal is. Trouble signals are very important to know. It's the first level of telling you something is wrong. Smoke detectors. Recognize if they've been tampered with or otherwise impaired or even removed. Pull stations. We've seen glue out of a tube poured into manual pull stations to render them inoperable in a vandalized vandalization attempt. Lock your breaker panels. I think we talked about that. And you want to secure your ventilation fan control cabinets. Very important if you do have a fire that your ventilation fans are operating. Next slide, please. More on protecting your fire alarm systems. There are protective covers for smoke and heat detectors to prevent tampering or vandalism. They don't interfere with the detection of smoke or fire. Typically, there's steel wire meshing that's secured to a wall or ceiling. There's also manual pull stations, covers, and guards, which I'm sure you've seen, that they can be alarmed also. So if somebody tries to open the cover, you will get an alarm. And locked covers or cabinets for power supplies and junction boxes. Very important. Systems can be made inoperable by, vandalizing the power supplies and disconnecting wires. Next slide, please. Fire alarm and sprinkler monitoring. This is very important. Make sure you have an active monitoring contract with an underwriter's laboratory listed central station. This can be provided by your fire protection contractor. I'm sure all of you have that. It's required by code, but you would be surprised at the number of facilities we see that do not have monitoring set up. Make sure your building callback information is accurate and up to date. Review it on a regular basis. One thing that a reliable and professional fire protection contractor will do will be to send you a form on a regular basis to make sure that your callback information, names, phone numbers, email addresses are accurate. You receive a call that the central station is reporting a trouble or an off-normal condition, schedule a repair call immediately. Don't let that fester for a long period of time. These systems will tell you if there's something wrong. Get your contractor out there to take a look at this. Another very important thing, talk to your fire protection contractor now to make sure that they're committed to providing emergency service calls in the event of civil unrest. That's important that you know that they're going to be able to respond if you've got a problem in the middle of civil unrest. One of the things that you can ask them, do they have technicians maybe in a hotel ready to go close to your location? We have done this during when we know snowstorms or bad weather is going to happen, so that we know we're going to need to be nearby our customer base. Make sure your contractor can do that. You also want to check your elevator emergency phone regularly to make sure it's working properly. If you have somebody trapped in the elevator, you want to make sure that they are able to communicate to your central station. Next slide, please. Sprinkler systems and fire pumps. First thing I'd like to talk about is fire department connection. The fire department connection is used, it's on the front of the building typically to supplement water to the sprinkler and standpipe system. It's very important. Unprotected fire department connections are very vulnerable to vandalism and just debris. If you don't have caps for them, birds have been known to make nests in there. We have seen trash put in there. And what that does is it will impede the flow of water when the fire department needs to use this connection. Minimal protection can give you peace of mind. Brass or plastic caps, they can be removed. We do recommend plastic caps because brass caps can be used as a weapon. You can get supplemental fire department connection locking caps. They're available. They can be opened with a key. They are available with a tamper alert. You always want to check with your local authority having jurisdiction for approval before installing any of this kind of equipment to make sure that they have the keys or the ability to get those caps off and supply your systems. Next slide, please. This is simply a picture of a fire department connection with debris in one side and a cover, a locked cover on the right. The connection on the left, it's going to prevent water flow when the fire department connects to that, or it's going to cause a delay. The fire department likely will see that and get whatever debris is in the connection out. But if somebody's taken a stick or a pole and pushed them way down into the pipe, they're not going to be able to get that out. So securing your fire department connection is very important. Next slide, please. It's another picture of a fire department connection with locking caps. These can't be taken off except by somebody with a key that is authorized to take them off. So they're not going to be able to be vandalized. Next slide, please. More on your sprinkler systems and fire pumps. And this specifically talks to your control valves, your valve tamper switches, and your water flow devices. When they're open, the control valves allow water to flow into a sprinkler system. Very simple. Tamper switches detect when a sprinkler control valve has been partially or fully closed, and it's very important. This is going to be transmitted, if it's closed, to your fire alarm panel. Tamper switches can be bypassed by someone with rudimentary electrical skills. That is just a fact. Locking and chaining the control valves open is an option, but can be vandalized by bolt cutters. Again, it's why securing your rooms where the valves are is very important. Water flow devices detect water movement or a drop in pressure and activate alarms, but they also can be sabotaged electrically. Again, it's important where these devices are located to try to have them in a secure area. Next slide, please. On the left is a sprinkler control valve in the open position with the stem out. When that valve is closed, you would not see the stem that's protruding from the control wheel there. When it's closed, the stem is in. When it's open, it's out in that position. On the right is a butterfly valve that you can see the yellow there is in line with the water flow, which means it's open. When it's closed, it was be in a cross position against the flow of water. These are some things to note so you can make sure your valves are in the correct position. Next slide, please. More on protecting your systems. Visually inspect your sprinkler heads. Make sure they've not been painted, which certainly will affect its ability to activate. This isn't so much a vandalism thing as typically happens when you have your buildings repainted, but people could take a spray can, spray a sprinkler head, and it will not activate, or it will delay an activation. Like smoke detectors, you can put wire sprinkler covers on your sprinkler heads that are in vulnerable and public areas. Make sure your power supplies to your fire pumps and controllers are secure and have not been tampered with. You want the cabinets locked. You want them in a secure area and have the room locked and secured. Diesel fire pump drivers can have contaminated fuel poured in them. We have seen this where people have put sugar or something else to contaminate the fuel. It will prevent an engine from starting. A daily and weekly operation of your fire pumps is essential to ensure operability. This is something that you want your building staff to do if they don't already do this. It would be very easy for your fire protection contractor to show your building engineering staff how to do this. And you want to make sure that the valves supplying the fire pumps, your fire water supply, are inspected visually on a regular basis to ensure they're in the proper and open position. Next slide, please. Portable fire extinguishers. We talked earlier. They can be used as a weapon. We have seen that on the news. They can be used to disable somebody by discharging the dry chemical in their face. It is an irritant, gets in your eyes and your nose and your mouth, and you're going to disable somebody pretty severely. You want to check regularly for missing fire extinguishers. If you do, you want to replace them. They do have tamper switches available for fire extinguisher cabinets. Don't see them a lot, but they are available. Next slide, please. That is all that I have. I hope that's certainly not an exhaustive list of what you need to do to protect your systems, but hopefully what that will do will increase your awareness and your knowledge and will help to make sure your systems are operable when you need them. Thank you.
Dave, thank you so much for your great presentation. If anyone has any questions for Dave, please put them in the chat. At the end of today's webinar, Cynthia will read those questions off, and Dave and any of the other panelists today will get those questions answered for you. Now we'll switch to the next slide, where I'll begin my portion of today's presentation, and I'm going to be covering preparing for civil unrest and large-scale events. And we can go to the next slide. So my agenda and the 4 bullets that I want to focus on today is gathering intelligence pre and during event, preparing your assets pre-event, vendor discussion pre-event, and vendor discussions during an actual large-scale event or a civil unrest or protest event. And we can move to the next slide, please. So gathering intelligence is the absolute first step to prepare for any kind of large-scale event or potential civil unrest event. You must gather as much intelligence from as many resources as you can. The same source should also provide live updates as events occur during the event. So whatever resource that you gather your data from, you want to also hope that that same resource gives you real-time updates on the activity that's currently out there happening. There are many resources available in this region to allow you to receive alerts and intelligence pre and during an event. It is also important that you determine which source that you deem as your credible source. Your tenants or your employees, they're going to be relying on you. You may be their credible source. What are you deeming as your credible source? Here on today's webinar, we're not going to be able to determine that for you. That could be any of the ones that I have listed here. It could be the DC alerts. It could be Arlington alerts. It could be Alert Montgomery. It could be WPO News. It could be any of your local news channels. That determination has to be from you. What is your credible source? Many sources post information about events. You have to determine what you're going to push out or what you're going to share with others. Your choice should be from a source that you would be comfortable forwarding the information to staff, tenants, or senior management. If you're not comfortable with forwarding that information to your staff or your tenants or senior management, you should not select that as your credible source. Just a few intelligence sources that you can rely on here: alert services, vendors, local news channels, alert news sources, WTOP, etc. Emergency alert services like DC Alert, Alert Montgomery, Arlington Alert, law enforcement websites. Every law enforcement jurisdiction here in this region have a homepage and a website that you can get information from on activity, especially planned and permitted protest activity. HCMA. HCMA is a great resource for upcoming events and a great way for you to gather data and gather information. A couple that I think are very important, and that's your local business improvement districts. The bid services are one of our best, in my opinion, resources to gather data. And that's from Arlington to Rosalind bid to the Golden Triangle, the downtown bid, NOMA, Capital Riverfront bid. All these different bids are very, very good with working with local law enforcement to get information and to share alerts. And that also includes traffic and weather conditions sometimes. So the bid is a very, very reliable, in my opinion, source to gather data. Neighboring properties. You can't go wrong with communicating with your neighbors. And your neighbors, it's fine that it's a neighboring property, but I also recommend that you use some of the resource groups that you're a part of. If you have a group of property managers and you all share intelligence on, or have like, say, a text group, share that information. Me and several of my colleagues in the region here who have a similar job to mine, we share data every single day. I'm not going to, name drop or anything, but I have one source that every morning around 6 a.m., we get an email of the activity that they're seeing because they go out early, or of what they've gathered. We have no problem with sharing intelligence with each other. And then lastly, I think this is a very, very good source that I don't think enough of us really tap into for information and intelligence sources, and that is our security vendors. Listen, our security vendors in this region, most of them are really tied into the local law enforcement, not tied into it where they're just getting the same thing we're getting regarding alerts. They have relationships. They can make phone calls. They can talk to the right people over at the different law enforcement agencies and get the right information for you to share with your tenants, with your staff, with senior management, opposed to just getting information. I would definitely, and every company doesn't have, someone like me on staff, but you certainly, I'm going to say 99% sure that you have a security vendor that you can get intel from, and they have access to get those resources for you. May we go to the next slide, please? Preparing your asset. One, as we just stated, you want to gather the intelligence information on protest activity. You want to gather it and say, hey guys, this is what's going on. This is what's going to be happening. This allows your tenants to make a determination for themselves as to how they want to staff. Do they want to have staff to come in? Are they going to stay home this day? Is it going to be a remote situation? You want to try to give them as much information to include street closures and traffic pattern changes, so that they can make their decision as to what's best for them and their staff. You want to send a memo, again, addressing all this. If you can get a map of the closures, you want to also provide that to the tenants as well. Update your property police kit. A lot of us call it police kits. Some of them call it first responder kits, but these are kits that will allow when law enforcement or any other emergency responders reply to your building, they'll have a map of how to navigate your property in order to either properly secure it, or any event that there's a civil disturbance or civil unrest in your building. We want them to have the ability to get in your building and navigate in your building. Remember, the police are not in your building every day. They don't know the route of your building. I recommend that if you do create a plan, or at least have a kit available, you want to make sure that you got working order fobs in there. Sometimes with these kits, we'll put a fob in there and then we don't test them. And then now law enforcement needs them, or emergency responders, and now we find out that the fob is no longer working. You should also include building floor plans, which is huge. That will help the police navigate the building. They can know where stairwells are. They can know where tenants are located. They can absolutely know how to navigate your property with building floor plans. And then lastly, I highly recommend property management contact information. It is not likely that you'll be at the property during a scheduled large-scale event. I'm going to use the inauguration. It's not likely that property management teams come to the office on inauguration day. Some of you may, but most of you do not. It's important that your information, or the police have access to the information to be able to contact you in case there's something occurring that's directly affecting your building, but also your tenants. Survey tenant contacts. You want to confirm who will have essential personnel at the property. You want to make sure your security team knows who's in the building. You want to make sure that your security team knows who's not in the building. Is there going to be a building full of people? Will we have 5% of the people here? Will we have the IT people here because they're essential? You want to make sure that your security team knows that, so any event there's an incident that happened, they know who they're there to protect. They know what they need to do. They know where to send the law enforcement or emergency responder assets directly into that building. Update tenant contact and property teams information. I'm sure you all regularly check that information, but I would highly recommend that in a planned, or even, well, I'll say in a plan for this one, you want to make sure that that information is current and it's up to date, including your tenant listing. Sometimes tenants move in, move out. We need to make sure that that tenant listing is always updated and current. Tenants and property staff, you should remove outside furniture, restaurant chairs and tables. Most of us have tenants now that are restaurants. It's spring, summer months occur. They have the outside tables. Those are things, are projectiles, they're weapons. Newspaper boxes, they may not belong to you, but if no one from the bid or no one from that company has picked them up, I highly recommend you bring them in. And I'm only speaking from experiences where newspaper boxes were used as weapons. It didn't work, but they were used as weapons. Trash cans, recycling bins, all those things should be removed from the perimeter of your property and brought in. I would contact the bids, and I would have the bids to actually come and remove the bicycles and scooters, the e-bikes and the e-scooters that are sitting in front of your buildings, because those two have been used as weapons actually against the police during large-scale event and protest activity. Now, I've had a situation where they didn't get picked up. And what we did is we just moved them into our building, into a secured location, which ended up being fine because they were all GPS. They had a GPS on them. So the bid and whoever was responsible for them, they knew where to locate the bikes. And then after the event, we moved the bikes back out and it was fine. It was no issue. But we were able, I'm not going to say bikes, it may have been the scooters. But I would highly recommend that you reach out and see if those things could be brought in. I would have the security team. You want the security team to check all base building doors to assure they are secured as well as performing as designed. I recommend this as an off-hour check. And what I'm going to speak about is you want them to look at that door that has that card reader, that has that red light that says, I'm secure. You want to pull that door to make sure that it is actually secure. You don't want to be in a situation where you're assuming that your door is secure, and because it's a malfunction, that door is not secure, and now access to your property is available. I would highly recommend that those checks are done after hours when your building is secure to assure that your system is doing exactly what you have it designed to do. Check CCTV perimeter cameras to assure all capabilities are functional. You want to make sure if you got pan, tilt, and zoom, you want to make sure that's working. If you have the 360 cameras, you want to make sure that's working. If you have nighttime light cameras, you want to make sure that the images are portraying clearly so that any event, that any incident happens, you have a very clear image of CCTV that you can pass on to law enforcement to help with their pursuit of any kind of investigation of criminal activity. Lastly, on this slide is conduct a soft and hard lockdown test. If you are building like me that has automatic lockdown features where you use a card, or even if it's a button, you want to test those features now. I recommend that you not only test the ability to lock your building down, but I recommend that you test the ability to unlock your building, because there could be a situation where the civil disturbance has occurred inside your building and now your building is locked down, but you have actually locked out law enforcement. So you need to be able to have the ability to remotely release doors to allow law enforcement in, but you also need to have the ability remotely to secure your asset, including the parking garages and loading dock, in the event that you need to keep people out. We can go to the next slide, please. Conversations. You want to start having conversations before the actual scheduled event. Conversations with your access control provider. This conversation should focus on availability of mechanics, like Dave mentioned, availability of mechanics in the event of equipment failure, how your vendor can handle the bandwidth of multiple equipment failures for multiple clients, and what are the realistic time frame for a mechanic response. Remember, during a situation like that, you're not the only customer. So you could very well be in a situation where you have an equipment malfunction, but a property on the other side of town that is also a client has that malfunction. You want to find out now from your provider, what are their capabilities? Conversation with your mass communication provider. If you use a company that allows you to send out mass messages to your teams, from my experience, you want to question the bandwidth of multiple messages being sent by multiple clients, multiple customers. Can they handle 700 messages being sent within a 2-hour time frame? Can they handle 30 messages being sent? Can they handle the bandwidth of information being brought back to you, depending on the type of mass communication system that you have? Conversations, as Dave said, with the elevator vendor to assure that staff located in the area, and that any event of any equipment failure issues, you want to make sure that they can get someone there, especially if you have a person trapped. Remember, law enforcement and emergency responders and Cool Fire Department, they're probably going to be focused on the area, which means if you have an elevator entrapment, in which it doesn't have to be anything malicious because it's an elevator, it just happens. You don't want to have a situation where you can't get emergency responders there, and also you can't get a mechanic there. That will be an issue for you and that person that's entrapped. So you want to make sure that your vendor is available and where they're staging people so that they can get to your property in the event that you have an issue with your elevators. And then lastly, you want to talk with your security vendor to assure additional staffing is available to assist in crowd control. My experience here in this region for the last 19 years, most of the security vendors not only have the officers that we request and they're assigned to us. They normally put together a detail of more higher level security professionals. And they are also on call in the event that they need to respond on a more senior level, and it's a mass amount of people. It's, you know, more than just a one or two. They have additional bodies, but you want to have that conversation now. What these conversations can do for you and your vendor is, if these things are not currently in place, that conversation you just had, these 4 bullets, now puts that on your vendor that maybe that's something we should be looking to do. And now they will start doing that. It really truly starts with us. The vendors are great, but we have to tell them what our expectations are, especially for large events like this. If we can go to the next slide, please. And then questions you need to ask. You need to ask yourself these questions. Does your property have shatter/blast film on the windows? We found out during the summer of 2020 and during the last presidential inauguration, you have crowds of people and crowds of protesters that choose to throw bricks and things of that nature and burst windows on, especially on our street level or lobby level. Do you have plywood available? All of us know about the plywood issues we had in 2020. We're putting the plywood up, we're taking the plywood down. Did any of us save that plywood? Do we have a vendor that can install that plywood? Is there a system in place now where your engineers are installing that plywood for us? Remember, the plywood installation became a very expensive non-budgeted item for all of us. It costs us every time we put it up. It costs us every time we took it down. And I believe that summer we all may have done that 3 to 4 times. Do you have the ability to disable base building card readers to deny all access into your property during the civil disturbance? You want to be able to have that ability remotely. Do you have remote CCTV available? Can you put eyes on your property? Does engineering have a remote access to the building systems? Can they shut down outside air intake remotely? Have you trained tenants and staff on shelter-in-place procedures? Do they know what to do if you have to declare, or law enforcement declares that there's a shelter in place and we need to react? Are there supplies in place if the key building personnel had to stay a long duration in a property? Do you have things that could assist them if they needed to stay in a building? Is there food? Is there water? Are there other things that they would need for extended long time? Is there a shower they can take? Are there other things in place that will allow them to stay for a duration of time? Have you had the conversation with your staff about even bringing prescription meds that they have are required to take? Have you had that conversation? Do they have enough if they had to stay at the building for a duration of time? When's the last time you viewed and your team viewed your business continuity plans? Have you urged your tenants to review their internal BCP? I highly recommend that you and have your tenants to review, because if not, they're going to be coming to you to give them the solution on business continuity. And you already have your plan and what you should be doing, but when have you and your team reviewed that? And lastly, have you updated your staff emergency contact information? Do you know how to get everyone in an emergency situation? And we can move to the next slide. With that portion, again, with me, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer all questions. And we're going to now turn the room over to my colleague, Sierra Clark, and she's going to give you preparation of civil unrest from an operations perspective. Sierra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lanile. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I think Lanile and Dave gave great depictions of what you should and shouldn't be doing during civil unrest. So I'm going to go through mine, and I'll try to kind of jump over the things that I know has already been said. So Cynthia, you can next slide. So I want to go into things to consider before the civil unrest, if there is time. Partnerships. Have you talked to the buildings that surround yours? I'm located in Chinatown, so having conversations with the bigger buildings, City Center, having conversations with the Petco building, finding out what their protocols are so that you guys do not clash, making sure that you kind of understand what they're going to be doing during that time as well. And then also it helps because if they have insight that you don't have, you guys can communicate to kind of find out what is being sent. Vendors, have those conversations beforehand, knowing what they can and can't take care of for you. Some stone, metal, wood vendors do also take care of exterior stone that may have spray paint on it or not. So you want to know those kind of things ahead of time. Communication, are all of your systems working? Are you planning to send it out via email? Do you have a system called Live Safe where you're able to send it via text? Are all of those things working appropriately? Your building personnel, are they able to get on site? Should they come on site? If you know that there is a potential protest coming at the end of the day, should your cleaning staff come on site or wait until it's over? Having a schedule or a plan with them and understanding what their plan is as well. For your retail, does your retail have a plan? Do they have a safeguard for their glass outside their windows? Do they have a plan for if someone does bust in, do they have security? Kind of what is their plan in terms of protest activity? Have you started looking at organizational duties? Do you have someone that sends out the messages? Do you have someone that gets the intel? Do you have someone that does the perimeter walks? Knowing what everyone's job is just in case someone isn't able to be on site. So if the person that sends out those messages is not able to be with you, who's next? Who knows how to do it? Making sure everyone knows how to do it. And then as Lanelle said, contacting the bid or ride share programs to find out what's going to happen with those scooters, what's going to happen with those bikes. Not letting those type of objects be left outside of your property and become a potential threat. And then lastly, getting in contact with your tenants, making sure to understand exactly who you should be contacting should you find out that there is a protest coming. Something I didn't add, but I wanted to add is also understanding who your tenants are and what their companies do. We all have a lot of tenants and we know particularly some have reputations that may incite more protest activity. So understanding what threats could be potential at your property, given what's happening on the news and things that are happening throughout. Cynthia? So going into things you'll need to know from your vendors, things that you should be thinking about when you're talking to your vendors. Find out those lists of services that they do provide. Are they able to clean the graffiti off? Are they able to take care of the inside of the building as well as glass on the outside of the building? When are they available to come out? Will it have to be post the civil unrest or can they come out during? What is pricing like? My lights are cutting off. What is the pricing like for those services? You don't have time sometimes during a civil unrest to do a bid. So if you're looking at pricing and it's outstanding, it's something that you guys can't accomplish with that, then taking those type of things out and looking at how much those services are. Do they need an agreement in place? Is a PO okay? Kind of what processes do they have to go through for you to be able to actually have the services during the protest? How is payment collected? Are they able to send an invoice? Do they have to take payment in place? If you're not able to make it on site, how will you pay? Have you worked in this type of situation? Understanding, are they prepared to work under pressure? If we know something is happening, like Lanelle said, back during COVID times when we had all the plywood, are they able to come out and do that type of work during uncertainty? Is documentation needed for your property? Are you a federal building? Do you have to have any check-in processes? Can that be done beforehand? In case of a temporary fix, are they able to come back out and do permanent repairs? How long will that take? We all know right now we're fighting against getting material back order. So do they have that in place? Are they prepared to get that broken front door replaced within the day so that your tenants can get back into the building? And then lastly, are they able to handle large scale projects? Can you, as for my vice presidents and directors, are you able to do a full portfolio agreement? Are you able to include all of your locations in your portfolio in that one agreement? That'll probably help with expediting the need of services when the protest actually occurs. Cynthia? Cynthia, can you go to the next one? All right, things to consider during. Have your tenants been notified? Are you ensuring to update them? Keeping them updated. Sometimes protests will be on the other side of the city and in the blink of the eye, they're right in front of your building. So are you keeping them updated? Are the CCTV still operational? Can you still view all angles? Have they been knocked down? That kind of information. Has your higher management, asset management been notified about the potential threat? Are they in the know about what's going on outside of your building or what is potentially happening? What is the plan for remediation should damage occur at the property? Do you know what damages has occurred? And if so, have you started conversing with those vendors? Is access to the building still cleared? If those front doors are plowed down, are people able to just run through the building? If is glass broken and they're able to come through your loading dock? Like thinking about those locations, entering and exiting the buildings. If it's an all clear, are teams able to safely get out of the building and get home to their families? Thinking about those types of things. Cynthia? Things to consider after. After your team is done, have you guys done a full perimeter check? It may not be the property teams, but it could possibly be your security teams. Are there damages outside of the building? Damages can include broken glass, broken doors, wood, but it also can be untimely graffiti on the walls, things that you wouldn't want to be plastered across your building. Have you checked in with that remediation company? Are they on site? Is there any engineering staff that can do something temporarily? Is there a way that they can fix it until the remediation companies get there? Are the streets clear? Some people do want to still come into the office during protests. If the protest is ended and it is safe, have you let your teams and your tenants know that they can come into the building, even if that's streets away, that's, just getting into the entrance of DC, giving your tenants that peace of mind before they get out of their house and get into that building is something very beneficial for them. Has an all clear been sent out? If you guys are barricaded inside of the building, have you let them know that it is safe for them to leave, that it is safe for them to come out? They are waiting for that from you. And then lastly, what could have been done better? Doing a things to remember is always good after an event like this, because it helps you to kind of feel in those cracks that may have ensued during the event, or it may have been things that you just never thought about during that time. So key takeaways from this. I know I went kind of fast, but key takeaways before civil unrest, you want to make sure you're running through those practices often. Test your teams, test your tenants, test all of them. They'll be annoyed. They don't want to take time out of doing their normal daily things, but it will help for those times when you don't have time to prepare. During civil unrest, you want to be prepared for anything and ensure your teams are able to act appropriately. Try doing roundtables with your tenants, with your teams, with your vendors, so that they understand exactly what they'll do. You'll be surprised what some people say they would do during situations like this when prompted. So definitely kind of pick their brains and find out what their thoughts are. Vendor relationships, begin the conversations early. Get in those vendors' inboxes, check in, just do a just in case conversation, find out how they're doing, make sure there wasn't any turnaround. We have so much turnaround nowadays, making sure that those contacts are still those contacts and that the emails are still working appropriately. And then lastly, after the civil unrest, reflect on everything that was done, find those issues and adjust where you feel necessary. It's going to be a lot this summer, I believe, but I think that we've had a lot of things happen in the nation's capital. So people are prepared. You just have to make sure you're taking the time to practice. So thank you all so much. I will pass it back to you, Niall.
Sierra, thank you so much. Sierra, I failed to mention in her intro, everyone, Sierra is also one of the chairs for AOBA's Emerging Leaders Council. And from her presentation, you guys can see why she is one of the emerging leaders. And in my opinion, she's going to do well in the commercial real estate industry. So thank you, Sierra. Great job. Now we'll end our webinar by turning it over to our last presenters today, Katrina Kennedy from Garter World and Will Gilmer from Admiral Security Services. And their portion of this is navigating civil unrest, security preparations, response, and evaluation. Will, Katrina, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. We would like to thank Katrina, and I would like to thank everyone who's gone before us, because being security vendors, something that we value is when our commercial real estate and our property management partners have prepared and are, doing a lot of the things that were mentioned ahead of time. So if you could, Cynthia, could you go ahead to the next slide? Because one of the things that we value and one of the things that we discuss a lot in the nation's capital is we talk about our public and private partnerships, and we understand the importance of why that is needed to better support all of the efforts that were discussed before our presentation or before the slide that you're looking at right now. We understand that it takes more than just getting those DC alerts and the different alerts that come out. And Lyle mentioned this earlier. It also takes those individual and those private partnerships and private relationships that you have with different public figures and many different metropolitan police officers. As you develop those relationships and developing those relationships, it helps you to kind of sit down with your security vendor and to try to set up meetings so that you could leverage those relationships as well. And as you're leveraging those relationships, invite those different public figures out to your property, set up some type of meet and greet, some type of coffee with we used to call it coffee with a cop, But setting up those things ahead of time and having those individuals come to your property and to meet with some of your tenants is a great way for you to kind of not only secure the trust of the tenants abiding in your buildings, but it's a great way for you to kind of discuss and review what your emergency preparedness plan is with those different public figures. And as you're establishing those and discussing those with those public figures, when those individuals have to respond to your property, they will already have a foreknowledge of exactly what to be prepared for when entering your specific building if the need arises for them to report there. You can go to the next slide, Cynthia.
All right, thanks, Will. So as we all know, preparing for civil unrest is a shared responsibility, and that definitely includes your security provider. Advanced preparedness efforts, they go greatly in reducing the risk of dynamic incidents and making sure that your organization and facilities and tenants, of course, are protected from potential vandalism or violence. Now, when working or meeting with your security partner to discuss the partnerships and being proactive, the security partner can assist you with the intel. I know Linnell mentioned that earlier in the presentation, and any information that's discovered through our public-private partnerships, like Will mentioned. But also during this meeting, use this time to discuss your current post orders that are in place and any temporary revisions or additions that may need to take place. The security guards are serving as the company's eyes and ears, and it's an important role when they're observing and reporting of what takes place. So using the right defensive tactics, security can better manage hostile behavior and help to keep the property and the people safe. So rather instilling this fear, this personnel, the purpose is to make sure that we're able to help and effectively handle all situations. The lack of preparation is critical. You know, we've talked about preparation all throughout the presentation, through fire warning, the trainings and the different alerts that are available. But we're going to talk a little bit more about how to prepare, respond, and evaluate with your security provider. Next slide, Cynthia.
So in preparing, and this was mentioned also earlier, when you're talking about preparing for additional security presence, a big piece or a big portion of preparing for additional security staff and that presence is to ensure that the plan that you have in place is a plan that you're continually reviewing. So when you're sitting down with your on-site security supervisor, on-site security account manager, it is vital and it is very important that before requesting that additional security presence, you review with them to ensure that they already have a plan and they understand your civil unrest plan. They understand, and while they may not need to get into all of every detail of your civil unrest plan, but when it comes to the emergency preparedness and when it comes to the shelter-in-place protocols, it is very important for that your security site leader, your security account manager, to fully understand what his or her role and protocol will be, so that when you request this additional security presence, they're prepared and that plan is already in place, so that those individuals will have a better understanding of what your expectations are of them. In addition to that, when you're sitting down with your security vendors, it is important for them to understand if you're going to dismiss your tenants early, if there's going to be evacuation of that procedures, where you not only want those individuals to be located, but where your dismissal points are, and if there's another location where individuals will be being sent to, when they're going to not only provide that all clear for a particular section, but also, and I've mentioned this earlier, and we'll talk about it as one of the points when we're talking about sheltering in place. If they're sheltering in place, what type of items are we providing to ensure that those individuals who are sheltering in place and that those items are accounted for? Oftentimes, when we think about sheltering in place, there are a list of items that we may need, and you can go to hsema.com to kind of get an update for that. But I recall during the last round of protests and what we experienced in 2019 and 2020, some of the things that we saw happening at different locations was we actually needed shelter-in-place locations for security officers. So one of the things that you may want to think about is if a building is breached, at night and there are different individuals storming the building, where would your security staff go? Where would your security staff be able to fall back to so that they're protected? And then if they're going back to that location, do they have the necessary equipment, the necessary water, the necessary communication devices? Because if you don't have a landline in that particular location and you're not able to get cell reception, is there some other form of communication or way for them to communicate with the outside world? And I speak to that only because that is something that I know we've seen, and I know Katrina and her organization have seen, where security officers are also facing these different incidents where they may have to shelter in place. And so it's a good plan to have in place is to understand where a security officer and your security staff may have to shelter in place, depending on the nature or the level of violence included in the civil unrest. You want to prepare to provide your facilities to shelter police and to first responders if requested. And that's, once again, that goes back to ensuring that you form this partnership with your security vendor. And as their security vendor has their different relationships with law enforcement, inviting them out, preparing an area for them to kind of stage so that if they have to come in and use the restrooms, get drinks, get coffee, and even if it's possible for you to provide some type of snack or food for them, just so that while they're preparing themselves, while they're recuperating, they can go out and provide the assistance that not only for your building, but for the community. And last but not least, plan to identify a site of remote operation. And in today's world where most of us operate and can operate remotely, it's important that all of you're communicating with your security vendor so that you're having regular meetings, and that if you're having meetings with your staff regarding building operations, that you're including your security vendors in those meetings so that they're able to not only fill you in on what's happening on the ground with their site, but if there's updated information that you're providing or being provided during your meetings with your tenants and your senior leadership, we're able to provide it to our individuals on the ground and provide them with the necessary direction so that they can support you and your tenants during a civil unrest event. Next slide, Cynthia.
So when we talk about preparation, the officers, your security officers are definitely prepared and knowledgeable on how to respond, but we want to make sure that all parties, including your staff, tenants, they understand the plan and how to communicate with the appropriate point of contact. So for instance, in a true emergency with notifying, you want to notify the police of the activity on site and what they observe to provide accurate reporting. Too many times we see inaccurate reporting, and that can sometimes cause disseminating information. So just stating the facts, don't guess or speculate. This will help to contribute to unnecessary confusion. When you go into the coordination, there's a few different pieces of coordination. Coordinating with adjacent properties for a phase evacuation in the area, if at all possible. These phase evacuations, they provide clear instructions and help to prevent chaos, ensuring that everyone responds appropriately without unnecessary panic. Phase evacuations, they optimize safety to the appropriate response is triggered based on the nature of the civil unrest. Again, with coordination, this was mentioned earlier when we talk about coordinating with your garage management or the loading dock staff, if they are not a part of your team, to make sure that you're able to have orderly and expeditious egress. This also includes other entries and exits throughout the building that can help to eliminate, again, the disorder. Next slide, please.
All right. When it comes to evaluating your after action plan, Sierra spoke a lot significantly to a lot of the things that you would have to do when it comes to this. So in addition to that, what you would want to do is you want your security team to review their security procedures just to ensure that they were capable and that the plan, even if it wasn't perfect, that we followed it and that it was executed to a point where you can see what kind of lessons you've learned from it. Because when you're going through emergency preparedness situations, each one is going to differ a little. So what you want to come out of each one of these situations looking for is lessons learned on how you can continue to improve the process to make sure you're protecting the people who are, inside of the property itself, and making sure that you're communicating with each individual involved. So you want to kind of participate in an after action review. And as you're participating in that after action review, you follow it up with, once again, continuing new plans and participating in these things more than before the situation presents itself. So after the incident occurs, evaluate the security procedures, look for those lessons learned, and make sure you continue to put those things in practice. In the same way we do fire drills on a semi-annual basis once or twice a year, it's very important that you put together a plan for civil unrest so that you're actually preparing for it, not just during election years, but as we're seeing happen throughout the nation right now with all of these different protests happening on campuses. You want to make sure you and your staff are prepared after evaluating an actual civil unrest event as it's happened in real time. Next slide, Cynthia.
All right, so one of the important things, we know that a lot of information was provided today, so we definitely wanted you to have a takeaway and some type of checklist for your properties. So this sheet will be distributed to the attendees with the assistance of preparation. It includes some of the actions that we mentioned today, but in addition to some of the others that might not cross your mind in a time of crisis, right? Because right now it's before we're ready, we think we got it handled, and then boom, you know, we're here. Have we checked off our list? So we want to make sure that we're able to provide something like this. So I'll make sure that Cynthia has something that this can get distributed for. But that would be all. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Hey, Will, Katrina, thank you both so much. That concludes today's webinar. Before we wrap up today, I would really like to thank all of our panelists today, Dave Taylor, Sierra Clark, Katrina Kennedy, and Will Gilmer. Thank you guys so much. If you're still on, can you do your hand clap emoji to assist me in giving them a round of applause for a great presentation. I think you all did a fantastic job. I'd like to make sure we thank the folks at AOBA, certainly Brandy and Cynthia for their assistance. And then lastly, Dorothy and Kathy and the team that chairs our Emergency Preparedness Committee. Thank you so much for allowing us to present today's Civil Unrest webinar to the members of AOBA. The PowerPoint and the webinar, as well as questions that were asked in the chat, which I think there's only a couple asked, we will respond to all of those questions, and you all will receive both a copy of the PowerPoint and a copy of this webinar. With that, thank you guys so much for your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a safe and enjoyable spring. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn Island, everyone. That was great.
Thanks, everybody.